Welcome to this week's edition of Creighton's Offseason. I am Jim Flanery, women's basketball coach at Creighton. And a few weeks ago, I was joined by one of the best players we've ever had at Creighton, Jalen Agnew, who is on her way to the WNBA. And today, I'm fortunate enough to be joined by the absolute very best player to have ever played at Creighton, and that is Connie Yori. Connie played at Creighton, I won't tell you when, but it was a few decades ago, and we're fortunate enough that after coaching at Nebraska for quite a while, she has come back to our program as a program advisor. And so, Connie, thanks for joining today on the off season.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about yourself, Lance, when you started introducing yourself about the best player of all time. Oh wait, no, I watched your game. I've seen it.
Top 10 maybe, Connie, but I wouldn't call myself the all-time best.
Yeah, top 10 pickup player of all time.
Exactly. So what do you one of the things everybody's asking is, what are you doing? How do you keep busy? What's a typical day look like, or a normal day look like now?
Yeah, with what's going on? Yeah, sure. Just like everybody, you're trying to I'm trying to maintain some sort of routine. I've got a teenager, in a 15-year-old teenager who needs some routine. So I'm trying to maintain routine with, doing some things work-wise, of course. And, what's been kind of fun for me through this thing is I've really tried to focus on trying to touch base with a lot of alum, as you probably know. And that's been fun. And, when you're away, as long as I was, it's hard when you're, I've coached for, I coached for exactly 30 years. And now I'm back with you. But during that, 30 years is a long time to have student athletes. You times that by, 3 or 4 or 5 student athletes per year. That's, you're looking up in the mid hundreds. So I've been trying to catch up with a lot of the, a lot of Blue Jays. And so that's been fun. And then, I think Carly Tritz had it right. She said something about, and I'm sure you've heard it, but, you've got freshman 15 and then you got quarantine 15. Been eating more, cooking more, that's been, so trying to exercise a little bit as much as possible, but it's, we've got a pretty good plan. That there's a lot of people who are just in dire straits, and, we get to stay in nice homes and stay away from people as much as we can, but we're both in pretty good shape.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on the alumni thing. I think it's been good too, because like you said, when you're coaching and you start accumulating alums, and now all of a sudden the people from 10 or 15 years ago, or you haven't contacted them for a while, and you think, well, she's forgotten about me.
Yeah.
And this is a great opportunity to reconnect. So in terms of reconnecting, do you find that they have a different appreciation for you than maybe they did when you coached them, and vice versa? Do you appreciate them more? Because I know how it is when we're coaching them, we can't get over the fact that they don't rebound like we want them to, and that they can't make the pass that we want them to. So do you find that that's kind of a different and in some ways healthier perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I think, when you're coaching, you're always trying to drive kids to be their best. But I think, we've talked about this. To me, when you're coaching somebody, you don't remember what their stats were. You do, Mr. Mathematical Wizard. But I don't remember stats. I don't remember, but I do remember the way you feel about someone. And it's been really fun to reconnect. And even, and as you mentioned, in some cases, I mean, it's been quite a few years since I've touched base with some folks, and it's fun because you can just get right back into, you catch up on their life, and then you laugh about, things that happen, particularly about you mainly, we can laugh about what, but, they look at things differently. And I think just like anyone, most young people, as they become adults, they mature and they realize that, we as coaches, we're just trying to help kids to be better. We're trying to and get them ready for life after college. But, some of them probably feel, maybe a little differently than that. And, but I've really enjoyed this time. I really have, catching up with some of these folks.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think you're right. Sometimes you wonder when they leave if they'll appreciate you differently, and if you'll appreciate them. And then when you find that you kind of both have that, there's something meaningful about that. So anyway,
one of the best things in coaching is when you get an email a few years later, or a text or a conversation a few years later, and they say, man, I really appreciated the fact that you got me ready and for some things beyond college. And at the same time, what you're saying is when I took over at Creighton, I was 28 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. I was young. I wasn't ready to be a head coach, but yet at the same time, I made lots of mistakes, and I look back at that, and I've apologized to a lot of those guys in that area, especially the Becky Flynn, young, that era when we first started at Creighton. Those guys, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was probably too hard on kids at some times. But those guys are. It's been fun to catch up with, especially I think more that era than anything.
Yeah. What's your stress like compared to what it was, at its height? Let's say, give me one of the best teams you coached at Nebraska, or maybe even one of the worst teams you coached. And because I don't know if it's, when you coach, sometimes when you're really good, you stress because you think this is the team.
Right.
Or if you have one of the teams that can't win, and you're thinking, I'm afraid for my job, or whatever. So what's your stress level like compared to what it was maybe at its worst?
You're talking about today?
Yeah. In terms of like, I'm not going to give away your age, but in terms of just, and now that you're not, the head coach at Nebraska with all eyes on you in the way that they were maybe, 6 to 10 years ago, do you enjoy the day to day?
I absolutely love my job at Creighton. I love my job at Creighton, other than, I got to deal with you every day, but, I have no stress, in my job now, very, very little. And that's why I think I like it so much, is that, I get to contribute in a small way. But at the same time, I've got things going on in my life that are a lot more important to me. Not that they weren't important at that time, but I really want to focus on. And so back, like you said, 10 years ago, or even, 6 or 7 years ago, it is a different stress level. I mean, there is no question that, and the demands that you have on your time, you always have to be on. There's no one who puts more pressure on yourself, on a person generally who's good at what they're doing than themselves. So the outside forces, yes, provide pressure, but I think internally, particularly when, you're at an institution where you're getting paid a lot of money, and, the expectations are high. And so internally, you got to drive yourself to, squeeze the most out of what you got. And so there are stresses definitely that come with that. And so I am really enjoying my life now that I don't have to do that, at nearly at the same level. Well, you know what I do. I have a job, but I don't really work that much compared to what I used to. That's for sure.
Well, I think that's been one of the great things about the pandemic is just, I think it took a while. It wasn't the first week or the second week, but just the ability to kind of unplug a little bit. And I think about, somebody you and I know in the coaching profession, Charlie Turner Thorne, who's at Arizona State, and she'd been there for a while, and she actually took a 1-year sabbatical as the head coach at Arizona State. She negotiated that with her administration. And I said at the time when that happened, gosh, that's a great idea, because I think it can rejuvenate you and refresh you, but also just give you a different perspective. And teachers get a sabbatical. They get that, and I think we should actually look at that in every walk of life. Every 7 years you take a year off, and but I do think that that's something that I've felt really over the last month or a little bit more of the pandemic is just, gosh, you feel differently, and I think when you go back to work, or when I go back to work at the point where it becomes more normal, that you're going to have a little bit different perspective, and you're going to just be a little bit healthier and more conscious of that.
I agree. Okay, professors get it, priests get it. Why are you getting it? Okay, we'll call RAS after this and see if we can make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, so how are we going to replace Jalen next year?
Oh my God.
Give me an idea. You've coached a lot of great players, and when you lose somebody that's kind of the year before we lost Audrey, who was we really lost some really good players. And so what are some things you're thinking about in terms of how we can be just as good or better without her?
Well, you're right. I mean, and the thing about Jalen is she did so many things. I mean, obviously, everyone knows she's a phenomenal shooter and a really good scorer, but she also was a really good defender. She rebounded, maybe not always at the level every single time out that you wanted her to do, but she's a very good rebounder. So you're not just missing one facet of a good player. You're really missing, all around really good player. And that's why she's got an opportunity to play in the WNBA. So I think everyone's excited about the freshman class, but I think you first have to look at, who you have in your program, who can upgrade their game. And I think Carly has a chance to do that. I think the freshman class from this past year all can get better. And they all have an opportunity to improve. And they showed flashes of really good play. But I think obviously I thought Temmie had a great year. And I think she really kind of flew under the radar a lot because of the year that Jalen had. And I think Temmie can, add more to her game as well. And, it's just about everyone getting a little bit better. You're not going to necessarily, take one person and replace Jalen. But I do think, the combination, I think it's really an exciting time in women's basketball because there's a lot of good youth in the program. And plus you have, people like Temmie and Tatum who both had, let's not forget that Tatum was out for a good part of the year, and she ended up having a great, latter part of the year when she was able to play, and she wasn't even 100% healthy. So you got two really good guards coming back, and I think good guard play always is where things start. particularly at Creighton. So it's, I think there's some older kids that are going to have to improve their game, but I think there's a lot of youth that have an opportunity to, to step in and fill a bigger role.
Okay, so let's talk about UConn coming in the league. And I actually didn't prepare for this, but didn't you beat UConn sometime in the 90s, or when you first got to Nebraska? Did you play UConn?
No,
before you got to Nebraska, maybe even.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Connecticut State Division II school beat in the non-conference. I don't know.
Well, how do you look at that? You played when you played in the Big 12 and you had Baylor, and because obviously we're in a league where DePaul's really good and Marquette's been really good, and there's St. John. There's a lot of good teams, but we haven't had a beast of the magnitude of Connecticut. So
well, it's going to help our RPI. I think that's
right.
You'd hope. I just think you've probably done a lot more thinking about it than I have, but I think Connecticut
is worrying.
Yeah. Well, they're probably not quite where they were 4 or 5 years ago, which doesn't make them all that much more beatable, but maybe slightly more beatable. But obviously the good thing about another good thing about having Connecticut coming in is it makes you look more like a younger coach plan.
Good.
But I just think it's exciting. I mean, if you're an athlete that likes to compete, you want to play against the best. And so it gives our players in our program an opportunity, at least 2 times a year. Well, depending on how the schedule goes. Hopefully it'll only be 1 time a year. But it gives us, a couple times a year to play against, one of the elite teams in the country, and having, you put your shoes on and you do the best you can, and you take your shot at it. And, they're probably, they're clearly the best team in the league coming in, but it's a little bit like when Maryland joined in women's basketball or joined the Big Ten. They were a little bit, they're not Connecticut, but at the same time, you knew that you were bringing in a better team that was going to, overall make your league better. And I think that's exciting.
Right. So we've used that from a recruiting standpoint, like you talked about. If you're a competitor and you want to play at the highest level, this is your opportunity, because like you said, even though for them, they're in a downturn. They haven't won a national championship for a few years, even though they've gone to the Final Four, every year, other than obviously this year. But, I just think it potentially can help us in recruiting. And, we've been the 6th best league in the country for the last few years. And so we tell recruits, hey, we've been 6th, and we're adding probably the most stable, dominant team in the country over the last however many years you want to say. So we're going to be no worse than 6, but essentially, we could be the 4th or 5th best league in the country. And if you're a competitor, you want that opportunity. So I think that's, exciting. And this year, I think obviously will be a year like no other. I think it's, we've already found out that the semester at Creighton, the first semester is going to change, and finals week is going to move up. And so I think it'll be a year where, and this is what you talk to your athletes, we just got off a Zoom call with our incoming freshmen. And I said, first of all, young people are more resilient. They're more willing to embrace change than people like you and me who are older. And and it just, change is harder. I mean, just getting on this Skype was hard, right? But I think also athletes have a special resilience. So they have youth, and they have their athletic experiences where they've had to overcome adversity and all that. And I think the resilience, I think in some ways what's gonna lead to success this year by any college team, whether it's men's or women's basketball or volleyball or football, is is those teams that kind of can handle change. They can handle something different than what they're used to, and they can be adaptable. And I think that'll be I think we'll look back next spring and assess success or failure based on, wow, how are we able to adapt to the unknowns that we saw this past year that we normally don't see? Because I think you do that to some degree every spring when you look back on your season. How resilient were we? How did we overcome obstacles? How were we when things were bad? How did we, come together? But I think this year, even more than any other, that's going to be pivotal in terms of whether a team can be successful or not.
You've thought about that more than yes, but you're the head coach.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts? What's the question I would ask you is, Lucas is going to be a sophomore here pretty soon. At what point were you unable to help him with his homework?
Oh, about second grade, especially if it was math. No, I think it depends on the subject, but just like your kids will.
Yeah.
I like to look at some of his stuff once in a while. Once in a while. I mean, I can occasionally help him with reading something I was a communications English minor, whatever I was. And so I can do that a little bit, but I sure can't help him with his, I didn't get a good grade in geometry in high school, so I'm not going to be able to help him with that right now. So no, he's doing good. He's doing just fine. He can hold his own.
And if you could tell him to focus on one part of his game that he kind of doesn't focus on as much.
Well, first of all, he's not going to listen to me.
I'm guessing I know, but where does he need to improve?
His defense. And it's so funny because I've got a son that I was kind of a defensive oriented coach, and I've got a son who likes offense, but that's okay. That it'll be a learning process for him. But no, he's doing good.
Good. All right. Well, Connie, thanks for joining us on this week's edition of the Offseason.
Yeah.
Continued good health to you and to Lucas, and we'll see you maybe not in person for a while, but we'll see you in Zoom. But anyway, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all you've done and continue to do.
Well,
Creighton.
I want to just say something to you, and I'm thankful to be back at Creighton, and thanks to you brought me back, and I'm really thankful. And I have a great job. I work with great people. Not just you, but administratively. I mean, you look back and you think about RAS. I mean, RAS recruited me I graduated from high school in 1982. And I've actually been kind of hired 4 times at Creighton. One through the recruiting process, and then as an assistant for RAS for 3 years. And then he hired me to be the head coach at Creighton when I was 28, way too young. And then you hired me back. So I'm really, I love Creighton, had a great experience. And I'm just glad to be back where probably I belong. So thanks.
Good. Good to see you, Connie.
All right. You too. So
All right.
long. Okay. Bye.
Signing off this week's edition of the Offseason.